Hi, I'm John Gimigliano, Principal in charge of KPMG's Federal Legislative and Regulatory Services Group in Washington National Tax. Thanks for joining me today. On November 6th, KPMG sponsored and co-hosted a post-election event with Bloomberg BNA, where several key staffers from Capitol Hill and Treasury discussed the implications for tax law in the wake of the midterm elections, including in the international tax area. For the international tax panel, Ron Dabrowski from KPMG moderated a discussion between Bob Stack from Treasury and Catherine Schultz from the National Foreign Trade Council. The discussion focused on the OECD's Base Erosion and Profit Shifting Project, or BEPS for short. BEPS has proven to be an incredibly, and maybe surprisingly to some, influential process over the last few years. I think, at least in the U.S., there was some skepticism as to whether BEPS would maintain support from member countries and whether the OECD could successfully execute on its aggressive schedule for releasing its recommendations. It was clear from the panelists that so far the answer to both has been yes. Both Bob and Catherine expressed the view that multinational companies cannot afford to ignore the BEPS process at this point. To the contrary, the suggestion was that they should engage with the OECD in developing a set of workable rules acceptable to all constituents. It was also observed that U.S. lawmakers do not yet appear ready to accept the BEPS recommendations. Specifically, a letter from Orrin Hatch and Dave Camp, the top Republican tax writers, expressed reservations over where the BEPS project is headed. That suggests that the U.S. may not be an early adopter of the BEPS proposals. But U.S.-based multinationals may soon find themselves operating in jurisdictions around the world that have adopted some or all of the BEPS recommendations. On the topic of international tax competition, the panelists noted that some countries will almost certainly continue to provide a favorable tax environment as a means of attracting investment. That competition brings the possibility of friction with the larger BEPS project objective. How jurisdictions and taxpayers attempt to reconcile those competing interests will be an ongoing challenge. Further, to the topic of tax competition, the panelists discussed the ongoing European Commission state aid investigations. In those investigations, the EU has recently targeted tax rulings that certain countries have provided to taxpayers. If those rulings are found to be state aid, the remedy is to collect tax from the affected taxpayers as though the ruling was never granted. The panelists noted the extreme uncertainty this process has created. That's just a brief summary of the wide-ranging and interesting discussion on how BEPS is affecting U.S. tax policy. You can watch the full webcast replay of this session by clicking on the link below. Thanks again for joining me today, and please, if you have any questions on this topic, you can contact me, John Gimigliano, at the contact information on your screen.